The movie opens with a focus on Chuck Nolan's life, a man who later finds himself stranded on a deserted island. Initially, we see him at his company, where he is a dedicated and hard-working individual. Chuck places immense importance on punctuality and is determined that all couriers must arrive on time. This commitment to his job frequently sends him traveling abroad to the company's various branches. Chuck is well liked by his colleagues and has a strong romantic relationship with his girlfriend, Kelly. Their bond is deep, and they both desire to get married. However, the demands of their respective jobs have kept them from tying the knot. As Christmas approaches, Chuck prepares for a business trip to Malaysia. Before departing, he promises Kelly that he will return by New Year's Day. Kelly, concerned about being alone during Christmas, reluctantly agrees to let him go. As a parting gift, Kelly gives Chuck a watch with her photo inside, a symbol of their love. Chuck boards a private company aircraft, but a severe storm hits, and the plane crashes into the Pacific Ocean. There were 4 other passengers on board, but Chuck is the sole survivor, eventually washing ashore on a deserted island. He wakes up in a raft, disoriented and panicked, realizing he is completely alone. Chuck shouts for help, but there is no response, no signs of civilization anywhere. In a desperate attempt to signal for help, Chuck writes "help" in large letters on the beach, hoping that any passing aircraft might spot it. He falls asleep, but upon waking, he sees that the message has been washed away. Determined, he rewrites the word with a wooden piece, still clinging to the hope that someone will come to his rescue. Days pass, and hunger sets in. Chuck searches through the company packages that washed ashore with him but finds nothing edible. Suddenly, he hears a noise, and upon investigating, he discovers that it was a coconut falling from a tree. Chuck cracks open the coconut and drinks its juice, his only means of survival. By now, 3 days have passed, and Chuck's situation becomes more dire as his feet are injured from the sharp rocks, leaving him barefoot and vulnerable. He tears a part of his pants to wrap around his feet, trying to ease the pain. In his desperation, Chuck notices a mountain peak in the distance and resolves to climb it, thinking it might offer a better vantage point. Summoning all his strength, he manages to reach the top. But as he comes down, he is shocked to find the dead body of the aircraft's pilot washed ashore. Overcome with grief, Chuck gives the pilot a proper burial, but not before taking his flashlight and shoes. Time passes, and Chuck slowly adapts to life on the island, relying on dewdrops and coconut water for sustenance. He attempts to catch fish but fails repeatedly. His only solace comes from these small sources of hydration and nourishment. One night, Chuck spots a ship in the distance and becomes overwhelmed with excitement. He frantically waves his flashlight, calling out for help, but his attempts go unnoticed. The next day, realizing the futility of staying on the island, he decides to try and escape using the makeshift raft he had built. However, as he sets out to sea, he is overwhelmed by the strong, relentless waves and ends up nearly drowning. His foot is severely wounded in the process, and he is forced to return to the island. Dejected and injured, Chuck takes shelter in a cave when a storm hits. He spends the night there, using the flashlight until its battery runs out. Now completely in the dark and without fire, Chuck's hope dwindles. However, upon returning to the beach, he finds a few more company packages that had washed ashore with him, providing a small glimmer of hope. Chuck opens the company package and finds a few useful items, including a pair of skating shoes with blades on the bottom. He quickly realizes that the blades can help him survive on the island. Using them, he cuts open coconuts for food and water. With the sharp blade, he also crafts a pointed wooden stick, which allows him to catch fish. But eating raw fish is unbearable for Chuck, so he tries to make fire to cook the fish. After many failed attempts, he remembers that rubbing 2 types of wood together can create friction and spark a fire. He finally succeeds, and for the first time since being stranded, he feels a glimmer of hope. While searching through the company packages, Chuck also finds a football. In a strange turn of events, the ball gets stained with his blood. Feeling isolated and desperate for companionship, Chuck draws a face on the football, naming it Wilson. Wilson becomes his imaginary friend, someone with whom Chuck can converse. He even keeps Wilson beside the fire to dry, treating the ball as if it were a real person. Chuck soon faces another challenge, a chronic toothache that becomes unbearable. With no tools to help him, he resorts to pulling out the tooth himself, fainting from the pain. Over time, Chuck learns to adapt and survive on the island, developing skills he never thought he would need. He grows weaker and thinner, with his hair and beard growing long and unkempt. But he becomes an expert at fishing, throwing his spear with precision. One day, while eating, Chuck hears a sound and discovers a steel sheet washed up on shore. This discovery gives him hope of escaping the island. He realizes that he can use the steel to shield himself from the strong sea waves while attempting to escape. With determination, Chuck begins building a raft out of coconut wood, securing the steel sheet at the front. Constructing the boat is no easy task, but Chuck decides to wait for favorable weather conditions before attempting his escape. Finally, the day comes when Chuck pushes his raft into the water, with Wilson by his side. As they sail into the vast ocean, Chuck faces powerful waves and uncertainty. He has no idea when or if he will see land again, but he is hopeful that he will make it back home. He prepares for the journey, catching fish and saving rainwater in coconut shells for sustenance. However, during the voyage, tragedy strikes. Wilson, Chuck's only companion for the past 4 years, falls into the sea. Chuck notices too late, and despite jumping into the water to save the ball, he is unable to retrieve Wilson. Heartbroken, Chuck returns to the raft and weeps, feeling the deep loss of his only friend. After many days at sea, exhausted and weak, Chuck is finally rescued by a passing ship. Back in civilization, Chuck is faced with the harsh reality that the world has moved on without him. His friends and family believed he was dead, and Kelly, the love of his life, has remarried and now has a daughter. Despite this, Chuck visits Kelly, and they share a tender, emotional reunion. Although they still care deeply for one another, Kelly is married, and their lives have diverged. Chuck returns the watch Kelly had given him as a symbol of their love, and they both acknowledge that they cannot be together. Kelly returns the car Chuck had gifted her, and as Chuck drives away, Kelly runs after him, torn between her feelings for him and her commitment to her new family. They share one last embrace, expressing their unresolved love for each other. Chuck reassures her that he does not wish to disrupt her life and drives away, leaving Kelly behind, saddened by the situation. Later, Chuck shares his struggles with a friend, revealing that during his time on the island, he had once considered ending his life. However, thoughts of Kelly had kept him going, giving him a reason to survive. Now that he has returned, he must face the reality that he has lost her for good. Time had changed both of their lives, and Kelly had made her own decisions. Despite everything, Chuck carries one last unopened package that had washed ashore with him on the island. He had kept it all these years, and now that he's back, he decides to deliver it. When he arrives at the recipient's house, no one is home. Chuck leaves a note, saying, "This package saved my life," before walking away. In the final scene, Chuck stands at a crossroads on a muddy path, holding a map and unsure of where to go next. A woman in a car approaches, offering him directions. Chuck notices that the woman's car has the same winged logo as the package. As he watches her drive away, a glimmer of hope appears in his eyes, hinting that perhaps there is a new future for him. The movie ends with Chuck at a new beginning, filled with uncertainty but also the promise of new possibilities.